Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks to those of you who were able to join today. My name is Nadine. I am Chief Marketing Officer at ProtoScore. Today is our fourth and final workshop in the series, put together in partnership with Michelle Wax of American Happiness. I do see some familiar names here, so I know some of you attended either workshop 1, 2, or 3, or all three. Thank you, and we're so glad to have you back. For any of you who are attending for the first time, I'll just share a little bit of background. We were introduced to Michelle earlier this year, and during our first conversation with her, we quickly realized the synergies between what Michelle was doing with her documentary and the resulting American Happiness Project, and what ProtoScore speaks to around productivity and the things that can affect engagement throughout your workday, things like mental wellness, happiness, mindset. In our conversations with customers, we talk a lot about driving productivity and finding ways to drive productivity and engagement using data, but it's really, really important to do that in a positive and healthy way. So for today's final session, Michelle will be talking about how to use stress to our advantage. I'm very excited to learn more. It seems like a very fitting topic for the time we're living in. And with that, Michelle, I'll hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. I'm excited to be back with everyone here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And as I do, as a reminder, my face is probably really small in the top right-hand corner. If you want that to be a little bit bigger, at the top of the screen where it says I'm sharing my screen, you can hit the View Options button, enter into side-by-side mode from that drop-down, and you'll be able to drag the corner of my face out a little bit more, so it's not as much deck and presentation, a little more of my face. So would love to hear, as we get going, if you could type in the chat where you're joining from and also one thing you're grateful for today. That would be great, just so we get to know one another as we get going here. And throughout the course of the workshop today, going to be going through the presentation, sharing information, but also doing a couple of breakout rooms so that you guys can connect with one another and really get a little more engaged in the content as well. So to give you guys a little bit of background on me, I know many of you have been here before. I'm the founder of American Happiness Project. We started out back in 2018 as a documentary film project where we traveled to every single state in America, capturing how everyday people are creating more happiness, more energy, right? Transforming stress into their advantage, productivity, all those more positive emotions that I think we all want to be experiencing in one way or another throughout the course of our days. And so our goal with this was really to capture people from all walks of life, all perspectives and circumstances are really creating more happiness, joy, fulfillment, energy, meaning in their everyday life. So now what we do is tie in a bit of the science of what's happening in the brain, specifically today in terms of stress, and tying that in with the practical psychology research we've done throughout the entire country, and we continue to do up until this day. So when the pandemic hit last March, we started doing virtual interviews, of course, to really capture and get a pulse on what people are challenged or struggling with, but also what's working well out there as well. So two themes that have developed really recently, and many of you were on our last workshop on how to generate more energy, but people are feeling very drained of energy and they're also feeling the stress, right? And it's not really a huge surprise. I think we've all probably been feeling that throughout the course of the past year, if not beyond. And so today we're really going to be getting into the simple science behind stress, how it affects the mind and body, the 3 different types of stress, and how to start transforming that stress into more useful stress, if you will. And then top strategies, again, that you guys can start implementing right away. So today, I probably have the most strategies that I have had for any of the other workshops, because some things are going to resonate well with one person, other things not as much. So kind of pick and choose, what resonates with you, what you're excited to try out, and go from there. So as we started out with all of our other workshops, right, the wiring of our brains really goes back to our primal times. And so I want to take you guys back for our final workshop to our primal times, right, to those primal days when our top priorities were really to be on the lookout for what could go wrong, what is lurking in the distance, right? Any threats in our environment, our brains were really wired to keep us safe, to keep us protected, to keep us comfortable, and really in the familiar. And this is why our brains can naturally go to that place of stress, worry, right? Any of those more negative emotions. It's also why if you have a new idea or you want to try something new or make a change or a shift in your life, you're probably going to start to talk yourself out of it if you think about it for too long, right? It's already been done before. You don't have enough money to do it. It's not practical, right? All these things that your brain starts to try to talk you out of because it's trying to keep you in that safe, comfortable, familiar space. So we were embedded with the fight or flight response to really protect us, right? That was our top priority as human beings. When we go into this fight or flight response, all these different things happen within our bodies. And this happens within, or this can happen when any type of threat is perceived in our environment, whether it be a very real threat that's causing really that trigger, that fight or flight response, that stress response, or if it's something that's perceived in our environment as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bear lurking in the distance, right? It could be anything that's happening in our mind that our brain is interpreting as a threat. And from last workshop, right, on generating energy, you guys remember that we have these two systems that are in our body. That fight or flight response, that stress response, is the sympathetic nervous system, right? It's needed for our short-term survival because it helped keep us alive, keep us safe, but it's not really the best for long-term survival and really repair and restoration in our bodies to have that going all the time and have it triggered all the time. Really what we want to be in is that parasympathetic nervous system on the other side, right? It's needed for your long-term survival. It's how your body rejuvenates, repairs itself, really calms itself down, brings back that inner peace. All right. So like I mentioned, right, our bodies are designed to handle these short-term threats, right? Or, things that maybe were a threat for a couple minutes, but you either ran away in their primal times from a threat or you stood and fought it, right? So it was a very short-term thing. But because of the modern world, because our outside environment has changed quite a bit since our primal times, right? This can also be triggered by perceived threats in our minds. And these are likely what's happening all day, every day for many of us, right? It could be a big presentation, that difficult conversation, any stressful situation, tension in relationships. A really big one is any news content, social media content, right? Maybe getting the email you really didn't want to get. All of those things can be really triggering this sympathetic nervous system, this fight or flight response, which again is fine in the short term, but long term, that's where it can really start to affect the body and also the mind. All right. So, really, what this is, and I gave this comparison in our last workshop, but it's a really good analogy to kind of picture how your body is operating throughout the course of your day, right? Are you slamming the pedal of the gas where you're flying down the highway and this fight or flight response is getting triggered? Or are you more on the brake, right? Are you calming your body and mind down? Are you allowing yourself to reset and restore? So ideally, we don't want to be flying down the highway at 90 miles an hour because just like a car, right? We're going to get worn down. We're going to get burnt out. A car is not meant to do that, and neither are we as human beings. All right. So whenever we trigger this fight or flight response, your body is chemically, physically, right, knocked out of balance. So it's important to really restore balance between those two systems as quickly as possible. Now, if left unchecked, right, just like with a car, we're flying down the highway, right, the gas is going. If left unchecked, what happens is that sympathetic nervous system is constantly running, right? So we're constantly being bombarded with all this different content and potentially perceived threats in our minds. This can lead to a lot of different things, right? Can lead to a lot of different issues within our bodies and our mental health as well. So this is something that is incredibly important to do, right? Stress is everywhere, right? We're constantly experiencing it. And it's really easy to go down that pathway because pretty much most things that are flying at us all day, every day are not necessarily intended, but kind of skewed a little more towards causing that stressful response or that fight or flight, right? So we don't want to be in this situation of having all these things happening, really draining the body, draining the mind. As we know from last workshop, draining our energy levels, right? We really want to start restoring that balance. And I want to get into good versus bad stress for a moment. And then we're going to get into the shift that your thought process around stress can have. And I'm going to play a short clip from a TED Talk that illustrates this point a little bit more, gets into the research a little bit more on that in just a moment. But first, I want to get into the 3 types of stress. So number 1, we have eustress. And what this is the last time that you felt, maybe you worked out, you exercised, right? That's technically stress in our bodies. Maybe you were on a roller coaster or, went skydiving or something like that, that really got the adrenaline pumping, right? So that's good stress for our body. It's generally a short amount of time. It's actually good for us, right? The second type of stress is acute stress. So this is stress on our bodies and minds, but it's for a very short amount of time, right? So acute stress is not necessarily the most enjoyable type of stress, but it's for a short amount of time. And remember that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response, it's designed to really, operate okay in a short amount of time. That window where we either ran away or we stood and fought. So this could be things like being in traffic, right? Not ideal. Hopefully you're not stuck in it for a long amount of time, or taking something like a cold shower, right? This is not the most pleasant experience, but it's okay because your body is just in it for a short amount of time. Chronic stress is really where it starts to get a little bit dicey, if you will. And like I put on the screen a little bit earlier, right, kind of going into all of those, the health problems or the mental fatigue and really all these different things that we could experience, right? And this is the things that when we're constantly going over a situation in our head, we're constantly having tension or stressful kind of bombardments in our environment that a lot of us are experiencing day to day. So for our first group exercise today, what I'm going to do is break you guys off into breakout rooms. You will have to just accept the invite and it'll just take a couple minutes. I will also share this prompt question in the chat so you guys have it, but would love for you all to just share an experience or an example rather of these 3 different types of stress you've had in your own life, right? Ideally in the past months, we can keep it recent, but if you need to go a little beyond that, that's fine as well. So to start minimizing those acute and chronic stresses that perhaps are not the most pleasant, could lead to long-term, potentially problems or issues with the body or mind. Really what we want to do is restore homeostasis, right? Restore that balance to allow ourselves and our minds and bodies to kick into that parasympathetic nervous system, allowing our body to take over, to reset, to restore, to rejuvenate. Now, a simple way to do this is by toning the vagus nerve. And I'm going to get into how to do this. It's simpler than it might appear initially. But the power to toning this vagus nerve is if you look at the image here on the screen, what happens is that the vagus nerve really runs throughout most of the upper body, right? It ties in the mind to the heart to really the gut, right? It's this giant nerve in the body, and it really helps with a lot of different things. Now, with this toned vagus nerve, the more toned it is, the quicker that parasympathetic nervous system is going to be activated, right? So when it's activated quicker, it allows your body to restore balance quicker, alleviate stress internally quicker, and adds a couple great other things too, right? Mental clarity, immune functioning improves, all these different things. And I, of course, like to note that it's not like stressful things are not going to come into our life, right? Of course, we're human beings. They're always going to come in. But having the strategies and the ability to restore that balance quicker is very, very powerful. So to tone the vagus nerve, deep breathing is the simplest way to do this, right? And we're going to get into how Navy SEALs use breathing to their advantage. And there's 2 different types of breathing that we're going to get into today. These are specifically used by Navy SEALs, right, when they're in very intense environments. And if you guys start incorporating one of these breathing techniques into your daily routine, it's going to help quite a bit. All right, so the first type of breathing is called tactical breathing. And this is used when, this is by Mark Devine. He was a former commander in the Navy SEALs. And it's used when, an operator faced stressful situations, right? And so we can use this in our day-to-day lives, even if we're not out there on the battlefield. So tactical breathing is very, very simple. What we're going to do is we're going to breathe in for 4 seconds and we're going to breathe out for 4 seconds. Now, 2 things to note here. As you see in the diagram, you want to make sure that as you're inhaling, your belly is going out. So you're getting deep into the diaphragm with your breathing. And then as you exhale, your belly is going in. A lot of people initially will start breathing a little shorter in their chest. And really what we want to do is get deep into the diaphragm. That really, again, think of that image of the vagus nerve, right? It's running up and down all the way from our gut up to our brains. We really want to get everything engaged there. So the other point here is to make sure that you're breathing in and breathing out through your nose, okay? So you can start by breathing out through your mouth if that's easier, but ideally we're gonna wanna work to breathe in through our nose. Your air is actually filtered a little bit better when you breathe in through the nose as well, so added benefit. The second type of breathing you can incorporate is box breathing, right? So again, this allows us, like it says here on the screen, to draw the air deep into the lungs, slow down the breathing rhythm, stimulate that vagus nerve, right? Which is going to activate or runs throughout the central nervous system, activating that parasympathetic system, right? So a really simple way to do this box breath is to visualize as you breathe. So as you can see on the image here, really what you want to envision is basically you're walking around a box or walking around a square room. So as you walk up the first side of the box, right, and ideally you're going to close your eyes as you breathe and do this box breath or the tactical breathing. As you're walking up that side of the box, inhale for 4 counts, 4 seconds, hold at the top for 4 seconds. So hold your breath as you walk along the top of the box. As you're coming back down, you're going to exhale, and then you're going to hold at the bottom as well. So you go in, it looks like actually this diagram is reversed. So exhale, inhale, you guys get it. Essentially, we're going to inhale first on the way up, hold, come back down, right? 4 seconds, hold again for 4 seconds. And this is the opposite of panic because you're getting into that deep conscious breath. If you think about when you feel stressed or maybe have that moment of anxiety or panic, your body goes into very short breath and very kind of coming from the chest, right? It's hard to take deep breaths. But when we get into that relaxation response, we can really help trigger, again, toning that vagus nerve, activating that parasympathetic nervous system a lot quicker, which is actively allowing your body to restore, to calm down, to rejuvenate. All right. Now we're going to get into, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, the perception of stress. And for this, I want to get into a little bit on nerves versus excitement. And I'm going to share a small clip from the TED Talk called How to Make Stress Your Friend. This is about a 12-minute TED Talk. So if you're interested, you can, watch it after the workshop today. But we have a short clip that I'm going to share. And let me pull it up.
I have a confession to make. For years, I've been telling people stress makes you sick, but I've changed my mind about stress. I want to change yours. Let me start with the study that tracked 30,000 adults in the United States for 8 years. And they started by asking people, how much stress have you experienced in the last year? They also asked, do you believe that stress is harmful for your health? People who experienced a lot of stress in the previous year had a 43% increased risk of dying. But that was only true for the people who also believed that stress is harmful for your health. People who experienced a lot of stress but did not view stress as harmful, they had the lowest risk of dying of anyone in the study. 182,000 Americans died prematurely from the belief that stress is bad for you. I want you all to pretend that you are participants in a study. You come into the laboratory. You have to give a 5-minute impromptu speech on your personal weaknesses to a panel of expert evaluators sitting right in front of you. Now, if you were actually in this study, you'd probably be a little stressed out. Your heart might be pounding, you might be breathing faster. Normally, we interpret these physical changes as anxiety, but what if you viewed them instead as signs that your body was preparing you to meet this challenge? Now, that is exactly what participants were told in a study conducted at Harvard University. And participants who learned to view the stress response as helpful, well, they were less stressed out, less anxious, more confident. Their physical stress response changed. Now, in a typical stress response, your heart rate goes up and your blood vessels constrict. But in the study, when participants viewed their stress response as helpful, their blood vessels stayed relaxed like this. Their heart was still pounding, but this is a much healthier cardiovascular profile. It's a lot like what happens in moments of courage. We need to talk.
All right. So I found this just fascinating when I initially, learned this, because the thought process around the belief around stress is very, very powerful, and kind of shifting that perception, like we've been really talking about for the last 3 other workshops in the series, is that your thought process has a lot of power within the body and mind as well. So feel free to check out Kelly McGonigal, and her full TED Talk after this. Really, really interesting stuff. So getting into more tactically, right? You're having that stress, it's not feeling the best, right? When we're experiencing stressful thoughts and emotion, generally it's something in the past or the future, right? So if you think about the last time you were stressed, what were you thinking about? It probably wasn't the current moment. It was probably something that had already happened that you were going over in your mind or stressing out about, right? Or it was something that you were anticipating that might happen, that could happen, that was about to happen. It's in the past or the future. So a really good strategy, especially when you feel perhaps overwhelmed by stress, is to bring your awareness back to the present. If you're fully engaged in the present moment, it's almost impossible to feel stress because you're engaged in the present, right? We're not thinking about anything else except for the present moment. And there's a simple strategy to do this. It's called the 5-4-3-2-1 method. And what we're going to do with this method is engage all 5 senses to, again, bring our focus back into the present moment. So 5 things you can see, right? Your hands, the sky outside, a plant on your table, maybe your coffee mug, right? Whatever it is, your computer, whatever it is that's around you. Either say out loud 5 things you can see, write it down, or say it in your head, or just kind of acknowledge it, right? Bring our awareness back to the present moment. 4 things you can physically feel. Maybe it's your desk, right? Maybe it's the sweater you're wearing. Maybe it's the coffee mug, anything around you that you can physically feel. 3 things you can hear, right? 2 things you can smell. 1 thing you can taste. As we get lower down the list, it might be a little trickier to find those things, but do your best too. This is also a really great thing or activity to do when you're going for perhaps a walk outside, to really engage yourself and help kind of alleviate where we're constantly in our heads and all these thoughts are happening all the time, right? Bringing our awareness back to the present moment is very, very powerful. The third component is really to start audit what's driving your stress, right? And we also did this with our energy audit a couple weeks ago, but making sure that you're becoming aware and bringing to the surface what content, what people, what things, what activities, what tasks, what thoughts you're having that are driving your stress, right? And I love this quote: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. We talked about this quite a bit in the Science of Happiness workshop, the very first one, the power of really bringing your thoughts to the surface out of the subconscious mind is extremely powerful to do. And if you guys are interested in diving into the science behind this a little bit deeper, definitely check out the Huberman Lab podcast. He's a neuroscientist. He gets really into why it's so powerful. The simple process of just bringing these things to the surface and auditing whatever emotion it is you're feeling, right? So start tracking what activities, content, and people are driving that stress. And a simple way to do this is just taking out a notebook, right? Writing it down when you feel stressed, or just doing it at the end of the day today, maybe over the weekend. What have you been stressing out recently? Then a great question to ask is, do I have control over what's causing this stressful feeling, or do I not, right? Is it something within my control, Or is it another person, another situation, right? Maybe I have literally no control over it. Maybe it's something happening out in the world. Do I have control over it? Then, right, so the first piece is to bring awareness. If you can limit time or interaction with that piece of content, with that activity, with that person, with the task, with the thought you're having, do so, right? Or incorporate a strategy, or do both, right? Incorporate a strategy that we're getting into today to really start to bring awareness to these things and shift. And a great way to do this, and I'm going to go over this as we did in the Science of Happiness workshop, is to start to reframe these stressful thought patterns. And as we just heard in the TED Talk, the beliefs we have, the thoughts we have about what's happening, not just in our minds and bodies, but also out in the world and the people around us, is extremely, extremely powerful. So much so, as you saw in the TED Talk, that it can actually physically affect your body. So being able to reframe stressful thought patterns is very powerful. And if you missed the Science of Happiness workshop, what we want to do, instead of going to a place of a 180, right? Instead of going from all these stressful thoughts or stressful things and forcing yourself to just think positive, we're going to go to a place of neutrality. All right. So we're going to route these stressful thought patterns to a place of neutrality. It's much more effective long term than just forcing yourself to push it down or not acknowledge it or force yourself to think positive. It's just not sustainable. So from any type of negative thought, emotion, stressful thought pattern, we're going to route to a place of neutrality and start to reframe the thoughts in our minds, the stressful situations, to a place of neutrality. And a lot of our thoughts are negative naturally. You know, we're naturally wired to go to that place of stress and worry and all these different things. So if you're feeling the stress, it's extremely, extremely common and quite normal. But what we want to do is we want to shift away from those stressful thought patterns to the negative thoughts to a place of neutrality as much as we can, or as quickly as we can, because they're just so much more powerful than positive ones, and they have such really an effect on our minds and bodies. So example negative thoughts are things like, that'll never happen, right? Everything's horrible right now. Could be, I'm extremely stressed and nothing is getting better right now, right? Anything related to stress. I'm sure we have many hundreds of these each and every week. Example neutral thoughts are acknowledging the stress that you're feeling, right? But, you know, kind of adding a caveat to it, right? You take setbacks as temporary, or this stressful situation is temporary. You can bounce back quickly, right? You're going to find a way through. This is not forever. It's just a moment in time is another great one. And start to really reframe those thought patterns. The fifth component is meditation. And I love meditation. I haven't always been into meditation because for a long time, it freaked me out, right? I felt like I couldn't do it. I would sit down, I would try, and I would just be extremely distracted. And I didn't think I was getting anywhere with it, right? And I think from a lot of people I've chatted with, you know, that's kind of a common occurrence, is it kind of seems like you just have to sit there in silence. If you're not completely silent, right, and your brain isn't completely clear, you're not doing it right. And that cannot be farther from the truth. As I started diving into the science of meditation and really why it's powerful, that's when I started getting interested in it. So we've likely all heard of meditation, I would assume. And the powerful thing is that often what gets highlighted is, you know, bringing back mindfulness and bringing back the focus, which is of course important. But there's actual physical change that's happening within the brain when you meditate. And that's the really powerful part. So right now, how pretty much everyone is on this workshop right now, you're likely in the beta wave state, the very top of the screen here, right? This is your normal awake consciousness. This is your conscious mind, right? Pretty much how we're operating day to day. Now, just before we go to sleep and right when we wake up in the morning, we're in that alpha wave state, right? So we're coming out of the deep relaxation. We're coming out of it from sleep, or we're, you know, in that relaxation mode, and we're in alpha, right? This could be light meditation as well. Now, the interesting thing here is that when you go into a state of meditation, you often slow your brain waves down so much that you dip into theta waves, right? So the third column, or the third box here. Now, when you enter theta waves, you're allowed to dip into the subconscious mind. And remember from our Science of Happiness workshop is that most of our habits and our beliefs, whether that be habits of acting, thinking, feeling, right, what you believe about yourself, the world, your circumstances, are located in the subconscious mind. And so this subconscious mind is not really accessible when we're operating in our default beta waves, which is most people are walking around in that every single day. But when you dip into theta waves with meditation, you allow yourself to enter that subconscious mind and allow you to really rewire your brain more effectively. And that's really the power of meditation. So there's a lot of great ways to meditate. I don't personally like being in silence and just sitting there. I find that very difficult to do. So I always like to use a guided meditation. A really great app is Insight Timer. Headspace and Calm are other ones you guys may have heard of. I've heard mixed things. I think sometimes one person or voice or type of meditation will resonate really well. Other times, someone's voice is just really annoying and you can't concentrate. I was talking with someone the other day and they've tried to use Calm for quite some time and they just can't do it. Don't like the structure of it. So it might take a couple tries to find something that works well for you. But as you dip into this meditative state, right, you're allowing your brainwave to slow down, enter into that parasympathetic nervous system, the slower it gets. And again, it's powerful with really rewiring the mind as well, because you're allowed to dip into that subconscious. Kind of a layer beyond this is self-hypnosis as well, because it allows you to go into that subconscious mind and start rewiring and really crafting that mindset to your advantage. So for our second group exercise, I'm going to break you guys off and just share, have you tried meditation? What was your experience with it, right? What types did you try? Did you like it? Did you not? And again, I'll break you guys off and then I'll bring you back in just a couple minutes. So the final component is to exercise and or step away. So really whatever exercise or activity that you enjoy doing, moving the body, can really, really be helpful in stress in general as well. So as much as you can incorporate, not just doing perhaps a workout or going for a walk at the beginning or end of the day, but also if you can incorporate movement throughout the course of your day, can really, really help with stress and also build energy as well. So the 6 areas we talked about today: deep breathing, toning that vagus nerve, right? Making sure that you're either incorporating tactical breathing or box breathing when you start to feel that stress to really restore balance, activate that parasympathetic nervous system. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, bring awareness to your senses, start auditing and tracking and reframing your thought patterns. Incorporate meditation either through an app or if you want to do it on your own as well, whatever works for you. Also, exercising is kind of a form of physical meditation as you're completely consumed in that activity. And finally, exercising and stepping away, making sure you're incorporating that. So for our last group exercise today, I'm going to break you guys off. And like I mentioned at the beginning, feel free to share, what strategies you're going to start to incorporate, what's resonating with you, and even, what doesn't really resonate. And we'll break off one more time. Like with all our strategies, consistency really is everything, right? It's good to do something once, but if you're not consistent with it, not really going to make a long-term impact. And so make sure that you're scheduling in even the very simple things that don't take that much time, right? So whether it's in your calendar, setting an alarm throughout the day to make sure you're breathing, make sure you are checking in, right? Making sure you're maybe going for a walk around the block or doing some jumping jacks out of your desk for a little bit to relieve some of the stress. So you can, of course, do this through having a notebook, really easy to grab, the alarm, the calendar, anything that's going to work well for you. Even a Post-it note to remind yourself on your computer can be really, really helpful. So this is a quick recap of what we went over today. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Feel free to type them in the chat if you'd like, and I will go ahead and stop my share.